We recently had the opportunity to sit down with NYSFDA President-elect Jeff Jennings, owner of Jennings, Nulton, and Mattle Funeral Home in Penfield and Harloff Funeral Home in East Rochester. Jeff, a native of Rome, New York, and the youngest of 8 children, describes how he first started thinking about a career in funeral service.
I had to do a term paper for school on a profession, and I was trying to figure out what to do. Ironically enough, my sister told me I looked like a funeral director or a pharmacist. So I didn't do the term paper on either one. I did my term paper on banking. I interviewed a good friend of mine in Rome. His father was a bank president. I interviewed him for the term paper and decided that I didn't want to be a banker. But then it stuck in my head that my sister had said that. Not really sure what a funeral director is supposed to look like, but that's how I ended up working in shadowing, if you will, Pat Burns.
One of the more memorable calls during his career happened while he was still a student at SUNY Canton.
We had a race car driver that was from my hometown. His name was Richie Evans, and he died while I was in college. And I actually stayed home. The instructors I had at the time in college thought I'd get more by staying in Rome and working that funeral and helping out with the funeral than I would sitting in class learning about funeral service. So they allowed me to stay home for 2 extra days after a weekend break and be involved with that funeral. There was, if I remember correctly, 185 or ballpark pieces of flowers from race car drivers all over the country. The gentleman was actually laid out in a theater. The funeral home would never have been big enough, and it was quite an affair.
What has been the most unusual request from a family?
Right off the bat, I'd have to say the family that I had that insisted that they use a Sharpie and write personal notes on their deceased loved one prior to him being cremated.
Jeff shares what he believes to be one of the greatest challenges facing the funeral profession.
Finding the qualified individuals, the qualified staff. I think we're facing a real critical shortfall of funeral directors who are compassionate enough and understanding enough to move forward and take over running businesses.
Jeff is looking forward to his upcoming year as your association president.
I think going around the state to individual local meetings and being able to just kind of get a better feel for the pulse of funeral service in New York State.
Who have been his career mentors?
Pat gave me a start in this business that was just wonderful. He was a great mentor, a great teacher. Marty Nunn was probably the epitome of the funeral director's funeral director. Mel was a past president of NYSFDA, really strengthened my resolve to be more involved in the association. I sometimes like to consider this man my funeral service father, and that's Phil Parado. Phil has been a great friend and a real mentor to me moving forward. Again, past president of the State Association,